Hi, good evening and welcome to Colledge Facebook Live. This is a series dedicated to bringing parents and families better information about higher education and better access to college admissions. I'm Kelsey Terosian. We are thrilled to welcome you here tonight as we discuss the value of a liberal arts education with admissions veteran Tina Brooks, who is the Associate Dean of Admissions at Pomona College. For any of you tuning in who don't know us yet, Colledge is a private college admissions advisory group. We are a team of experienced admissions professionals that works closely with students and their families anywhere on their path to higher education. Our work, of course, helps students identify and apply to best fit colleges, but we also find that along the way, it tends to be a process of self-discovery. It tends to ignite their deeper potential in those high school students that we work with. A couple of little housekeeping notes before we have our panelists join us here on the stream. First of all, our goal, as I said, is to reach as many members of the community with the information that they need as possible. So I would love to invite you to share your feedback, hit the like button if you're finding this useful. Please feel free to enter any questions you may have in the comments box. No matter where you're watching, we will see them immediately. And if we're able to stop midstream and answer your questions, we will. If not, we will be saving time for your questions at the end. And I want to encourage you to take advantage, because not only is this a unique opportunity for you to have, you have the ear of Tina Brooks as the Associate Dean of Admissions. That's huge. But also, if you have a question, I can almost guarantee that somebody else has that same question too. So please speak up. I will be popping links into the comments box as we go. So you'll see a lot of reference material, so please keep track of those as well. Without further ado, I am going to invite our panelists to join the stream. First, I'm going to invite Jenny Umhofer, who is the owner and founder of Colledge. Welcome, Jenny, and Jenny's going to be our host tonight.
Hi, thanks so much, Kelsey.
Yeah, and then I'm going to invite Tina Brooks, who is, as I said, the Associate Dean of Admissions at Pomona College. Welcome, Tina. So nice to see you.
Thank you, Kelsey. Good to see you, Jenny.
For those of you who don't know Tina, Tina is a very unique admissions professional. She has enjoyed a professional path that has kind of wound her through publishing, through nonprofits, through freelance writing and editing and academia, and then finally landed her in college admissions. She has a BA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She has a PhD in English from UC Berkeley. She actually was a teacher at Agnes Scott College and at Westchester University, and she's worked in admissions at Scripps and of course now at Pomona. She's still at Pomona, is excited that she gets to kind of oversee electronic and print communications for the admissions office, which allows her to exercise those creative muscles and keep up with the writing skills. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Tina. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to these wonderful women who are going to enlighten everybody with their conversation. Have a great talk, guys.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Kelsey. So Tina, we've known each other for so long, working for Scripps College many, many years ago. Seems like a lifetime. So much has changed since those days, and especially this year. So I am really excited to have you on the show and to talk to you a little bit about the value of a liberal arts education. So I kind of want to just dive right in and, with all this focus lately, I've noticed on STEM and business and maybe even ROI of a college education, many parents are worried. What would you say is the case for a liberal arts education today?
Sure. I went to a large research university, you heard, as an undergrad, University of Wisconsin, but of course I went through the College of Letters and Science. So I do feel I kind of got a liberal arts education. I was able to dabble in a lot of subjects, take science, take philosophy, take geography. I had a range of courses, so I did love that, but I did miss out on the small classroom experience, having professors as my instructors, gaining skills in public speaking and research with faculty. So I think what a smaller liberal arts college can offer is the broad education where you get to study a range of subject matter. So you come out and you don't have a narrow preparation for a career. Let's say journalism. We have so many Pomona grads who end up becoming writers for major papers. One of our recent grads just had a front page article in the New York Times this summer as a recent grad. We don't have a journalism program. We don't have a journalism department or degree. So the point is you can major in anything and you gain writing skills, you gain critical thinking, you have scientific literacy, quantitative reasoning skills, exposure to the arts, and then you chart your course. You know, you become a journalist and you have deep knowledge in a subject area, but you also have this broad skill set. And I think having the small classes that we do, our average class size is 15, means that you get a lot of experience in speaking directly and deeply with a lot of your peers and also a faculty member who's an expert in the field. So you get to really pursue your passion much more deeply than in a large lecture hall where frankly you're more of a passive learner. So I think that intensity of the experience and the broad skill set means that you really are prepared to go into a career. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That you captured it beautifully. Recently, I think it was a couple years ago, I was visiting Pomona's campus and actually took a formal tour. And I was so inspired by the founding principles and the history I learned at the information session. I'm wondering if you can share with our attendees a little bit about that history and those founding principles.
Sure. I love talking about the history of the college. So Pomona was founded back in 1887. You know, here in Southern California, we feel like we have a shallower history maybe than New England, but it's really rich and interesting. So we were founded by men who had attended fine liberal arts colleges on the East Coast, and they wanted to do something similar here in Southern California, kind of be pioneers. And so they founded Pomona College to be a liberal arts college with the small classes and the close relationships with professors. But the state at the time was growing exponentially, and the state wanted all the higher ed institutions to be large and serve the state and educate more students. So the founders thought, what can we do? And they thought of the example of Oxford University or Cambridge University, which have a collection of colleges within a university setting. And they thought, let's do something similar in Claremont. Let's have a collection of small colleges that have the integrity of a liberal arts college, and they can share some resources, but the students will have the same kind of experience we had. So that's what happened. Scripps College was the next college to be founded in the 1920s, and they were going to found a college every decade. And Scripps is a women's college, so it was different than Pomona. Okay, the 1930s, we didn't have a college because the Great Depression. The 1940s, World War II, Claremont Men's College was founded to educate young men returning from the war. And they were going to be leaders in society. They were going to go into business and finance. So that institution became Claremont McKenna in the 1970s and became co-ed, but maintains that focus on leadership, and a large percentage of their students major in economics. So 1950s, we had the space race, the Cold War era. Harvey Mudd College grew out of that decade and was a STEM college with a conscience, with an infusion of ethics, the understanding of the liberal arts to make good decisions. Harvey Mudd is the smallest of the Claremonts. It is an excellent STEM college, has about 900 students. In the 1960s, Pitzer College grew out of the ferment of the 60s, the civil rights movement, women's rights, globalization, environmental issues, social justice, and it maintains that kind of a focus on social issues. At that point, we ran out of land, so we ended up with 5 undergraduate colleges, even though the original plan called for 10, and we have about 6,000 students in Claremont, so it's a really cool combination of the small college with all the advantages of the great residential life, small classes, but also students can cross-register at any of the campuses. And the way I described it, you can tell the missions and the ethos of each college are slightly different. And so they benefit from that diversity of students that are attracted to different colleges.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And it's really interesting how each campus really is right up against the next one. So there really is this sort of cohesive home base of 6,000 students that are really working together in a way. Such a fascinating history. Just, I love hearing about it again and again. So back to the value of a liberal arts education at Pomona College, which I know you want to share a little bit more about. How would you say admissions is different at a liberal arts college like Pomona? Like, what are you looking for that maybe other colleges aren't?
That's a good question. I think, smaller residential liberal arts colleges, we're very concerned when we read applications with what kind of an impact will this student have on our community? Every single person counts at a small college. One individual can have such an impact on everyone around them, whether it's your roommate, people on your floor, people in your classes. So we really try to assess that through their essays, through their letters, through their activities. Are they a joiner? Are they someone who leads? Are they someone who contributes through the arts or athletics in forming community? Do they have the skills? Are they open-minded? Are they flexible? Are they curious about other people? So although the soft skills and the qualities of character, I think, are very important in admissions for liberal arts, because we want to form a community that will be as vibrant as possible and lead to growth for everyone in the community. So students who are, geared more towards competition, perhaps, maybe are not the best fit at small liberal arts colleges, because that isn't necessarily highly valued. It's more highly valued to be collaborative, to work for the good of the group.
Wonderful. Anything that you would say is particularly special or unique about Pomona's admissions process?
Well, every school has its what we call institutional priorities. I think you probably remember that term. And so it's not always easy to figure that out as a prospective student or parent. But I think if you attend info sessions, you look at the website, you start getting a vibe, getting a feel for the college. What are they stressing? What are they putting forth as their values? So I think Pomona, in addition to valuing collaboration, we have a couple of other things that stand out to me. One is written on our gates that when you enter the college, and it's about, I'm not going to be able to get the quote correct now on the spot.
Okay, I won't hold you to it.
I'll paraphrase it. It means like paying it forward. It's bearing your gifts in trust for mankind. In other words, you have all these gifts you've acquired at this college. You're educated, you have these values, have had these great experiences. What are you going to do with that now? How are you going to benefit mankind with what you have? And so I think we look for that orientation in students who want to make the world better. That might sound cheesy, but it's true. A lot of young people have a desire to create positive change. And that could be in big ways or small. It could be bringing your gifts in the arts. It could be someone who wants to be a doctor or a scientific researcher, but someone who has that drive to do something with their lives and make an impact. And then the other thing I would say, we're fortunate in our location here in Southern California. We live in a really diverse community, and we're able to build a diverse student body. So we are over 50% domestic students of color. So we stress that we value the benefits of diversity in our campus. And so we ask students to kind of address that in one of their supplemental essays. How have they faced conflict within a community? Because if you're coming from all different places, there's going to be conflict. If you have different ideas and backgrounds, how do you deal with that? How do you get along? Or what does your particular unique background add to our community? So we also ask them to dig deep and think about, who am I? Where did I come from? What do I bring with me?
Wonderful. It's going to be an interesting year to read those essays, I think. Certainly conflict is part of the human condition, but this is an interesting year to be asking about those types of topics and to be reading, I'm sure, in admissions. So speaking of which, I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how COVID-19 is changing admissions in Pomona, or at Pomona rather.
Yes, sure. So like many colleges and universities, we've gone test optional this year. I think given the fact that many students could not take a test a second time, we definitely felt that it was the right time to remove that barrier to the application process. We left it optional because we felt, okay, some students have tested, some students are happy with their scores, let's leave it in their hands. So we did sign on. Our national organization called NACAC put out a sort of pledge that says optional means optional. We're not obfuscating, we're not saying that, but secretly giving advantage to those with test scores. So we signed on to that pledge, as did many, many institutions. And I know it's nerve-wracking for students to try to figure out when something's optional. Do I do it? Do I not do it? What does this mean? It means what it means. It's optional. If you submit the scores, we'll consider them as part of your application. If you don't, we're not going to look at them. And I do want to stress, scores were always one data point we would look at. It wasn't the thing that got students into Pomona or kept them out. Vast majority of our students were academic, or applicants were academically viable. So the scores were one more indicator of academic preparation or success, but we are going to be looking at your transcript, your grades, your teacher recommendations, your writing, all of those things to assess your academic preparation. We've also moved our deadlines, moved them back a little bit to give students more time. Early decision is November 15th, regular and ED2 is January 8th. So those are the big things for prospective students.
That's wonderful. You know, that's wonderful that Pomona College has been so sensitive to the uncertainty and giving students a little bit more time. I think even though we've known about the test optional movement for a while, it's still a stressor for many families. We're getting so many questions about that right now. So it's wonderful to be extending that deadline a little bit further so that families and students can get their ducks in a row and think about some of these important questions. The other question I have is, I'm curious if you can share a little bit about, from your experience in admissions at Pomona, any students or examples of students that really stood out to you as when you read the application, you were really excited, to admit them.
Sure, and I promised I would try to memorize the quotes, and of course I don't have that handy right now. No, I just did an essay workshop today, and I highlighted two essays that were very different. One of them was, and I'm talking about essays because being a former English professor, I definitely gravitate towards essays as the way to really get to know a student. Obviously, the student has to have good grades and good preparation, but the essays is what gets us excited, right? One of them started out, you're not afraid of death, Alex asked me, or something like that. So you're immediately interested that the student has chosen such a big topic for their essay, death, and it starts with a quote, and then it goes on to talk about he used to think he knew the answer to big questions, like, no, I'm not afraid of death. It's a black and white issue. You're here and then you're dead. Then he had sort of a near-death experience and really changed his outlook, and he realized not every question has an answer. Life is a little more complicated than that. And maybe it makes life more interesting that we don't know the answers to every big question. So that showed me a lot about this student. It showed growth, showed that they had learned something, that they were open to learning things in college. They didn't have all the answers. They were interested in the big questions. Let's just say he was a beautiful writer, but he showed me how he thought. It was a deeply intellectual essay, and I got really interested. On the other hand, this other guy wrote an essay that started out, I am indebted to watermelon.
Okay.
What does that mean?
That's definitely memorable.
Right, memorable, like who talks about watermelon? And it turned out, he was an English language learner, and he had to learn the word watermelon, and he went on to become interested in public speaking and politics. And, he was governor of Boise State. He'd done all these things, but he really told this really fun, interesting, personal story about his journey to be an English speaker and where that took him. and he attributed it to watermelon, showing like a much lighter side, a much more like I'm not taking myself too seriously side. And so both those essays stood out to me because they were so only they could have written those essays. It really showed something particular to them.
Absolutely. That sounds like both were really great fits for Pomona. I could see that connection.
Right. And it just goes to show there's no one, recipe or formula for a student. We like all flavors of students.
And so what ended up happening with these two students? I'm curious.
Well, interestingly enough, both were accepted. One did not accept our offer.
Okay.
Probably went to Stanford, which is what
okay.
And then the other one was admitted and is taking a gap year. So
interesting.
We'll get them next year.
They'll be there at some point. Well, at least one of them will be. Wonderful. So I'm wondering if you could complete this sentence. A Pomona student thinks a lot about ...
Yeah, I think a Pomona student thinks a lot about how they can make an impact, where their passions will take them and where that will lead them to make a positive difference. So if they are, involved in theater, how can they make an impact in a community? How can they make other people's lives better through that route? Or public policy, maybe they want to work on climate issues there. So I think combining purpose and passion and knowledge, as well as understanding perspectives around them, to do that work, I think that's sort of the hallmark. So no matter what if they're that deeply intellectual or the one who, has had a very interesting personal journey, they want to create positive change.
So really having an impact is part of what you would categorize. That's wonderful. And do something with their education. It sounds like take action. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Wonderful. So tell us something about, a little bit more about the avenues as we're talking about a liberal arts education and, with so many parents, especially wondering and worrying about return on investment and what happens after they graduate. Tell us about some of the Pomona avenues that or students take after they graduate from Pomona.
Sure. Yeah, this was on my mind because the student just emailed me in the last week. This was a great student who had worked as a tour guide in our office, and I got to know him, and we would have lunch together. And he actually graduated a semester early because he was really eager to start his career in Hollywood. He was a media studies major because I think he had done stand-up improv work, in LA, but like a shy guy, not an extrovert at all, like someone you could sit and have a nice conversation with, very sweet, had a kitten in his room that he'd adopted. So he emailed me this week and said, hey, I'm in this Amazon Prime movie that's coming out this month. I'm actually the lead.
Oh my God.
So I'm on the cover of this nice Jewish boys calendar and just, wanted to touch base and
oh my God,
what is going on? So he's one fun success story, just the nicest guy. And he got these jobs without an agent because I said, boy, your agent must be good. He said, no, actually, I got the agent after I got the jobs. So
wow.
That was very cool. And I do all our publications, as Kelsey noted. So I'm in touch with students that, I want to feature. And one of them, Chinasa, she was a computer science major at Pomona and did a cool project on, I think it's visual tracking and how that sometimes does not see dark-skinned people. And there's some obvious fixes that should be done so that people of all races are more, it's more equitable with visual tracking. And so she went on, she's in a PhD program right now at Cornell, but she also had a very well-rounded Pomona experience because I sat down and interviewed her and, all students can take free music lessons. So she'd taken free piano lessons throughout college and she worked in the sustainability office where you can It's called Recoup, and you can just give away your stuff at the end of the year that you don't want, and someone else can go get a bunch of hangers the next year. So you can just recycle things. And she was a mentor with the Office of Black Student Affairs. So she represents that really well-rounded but very deep education, where she went really deep into her field of computer science and went straight on for a PhD, but also had really an array of experiences as an undergrad.
Wow. You know, a lot of people, that's interesting. You mentioned computer science, that she was a computer science major, and a lot of people don't realize what a phenomenal program you offer. So I can imagine there are many different avenues. It sounds like what you're saying is it's a place where students can study multiple areas, right, and perhaps have a more interdisciplinary education, and can take that education and apply it to many different avenues, you know, even medicine or law, you know, a professional avenue, or a PhD, or go into academia. And in an example, I love to hear that, you know, your student was a film actor after Pomona, and you know, going into the entertainment route.
Yeah, both of them. I mean, Shinasa, she was an Africana Studies minor, and I think that impacted the way she looked at computer science. And when I think of Jeff, he had told me he took a class, I think, on every campus and in all areas of media studies. So he took creative writing, and, you know, he didn't just do film acting. So he really got exposure to so many different areas. And I think that just makes you more marketable. You know, you can connect with different people around different interests and fields, and you also can pivot to different jobs. Maybe this acting thing won't work out, and maybe he'll go into screenwriting. You know what I mean? So I think you are just more diverse as a person, and that makes you more primed for success.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tina. I'm so grateful that you came onto the stream today, and that you shared your wisdom and your knowledge with our attendees here. I'm wondering if maybe there's some questions that are out there that people have, and I was going to invite Kelsey back in to field some of those questions.
Hi, guys. What a wonderfully enlightening conversation, just as I predicted. I want to invite everybody watching to pop your questions in, and while you do that, I'm going to get you going. Excuse me, with some questions that we've been fielding a lot, and actually one that I was just discussing with somebody today, which is, you know, I think a lot of people have the misconception that a liberal arts education is the opposite of studying science or studying STEM. It's really interesting to hear what you were just talking about, and I was wondering if you could kind of add to that. The other piece of it that I hear a lot is that, you know, there are no career prospects after graduating from a liberal arts college or with liberal arts education, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, well, two things. One is that, yes, you can do a STEM major at a liberal arts college. So at Pomona, our top majors are typically economics and math. Every other year, one is two. So those are very popular. And in the top 10, you know, there's neuroscience, there's computer science, but also things like politics, international relations, media studies. So STEM is very well represented at Pomona. And I think those who are interested in STEM, who want to be at a liberal arts college, for one thing, they have other interests, and they don't just want to hang out with other STEM people. You know, maybe your roommate is a history major, and you have really interesting discussions about that what Jenny and I were talking about, really the connections where fields meet, like, let's say, biology and history, where those two things meet. So being at a liberal arts college, it enables you to interact with people who have very different perspectives. It infuses your study of STEM with other disciplines, which I think is so important today. It's much more important than ever. Fields like neuroscience or cognitive science, which public policy that students can do at Pomona, really feed from different areas of the academic disciplines. And then the other part of your question was?
About, you know, finding a job. after
Finding-
hours education?
Finding a job. Yeah, I always tell students, going to a large research university, I never knew where the career center was. I never went there once. I still couldn't tell you where it's located. So being at a small college, you're going to trip over the career office every day. They'll probably send you multiple emails. So resources are much more accessible at a liberal arts college. So they do a much more hands-on job of career advising, providing you with the tools you need, bringing back alumni. So our students get a lot of experience. We have funding for internships and research. I think it's around 80+% have done an internship. It's probably closer to 90, and then 70% have done more than one internship while at Pomona. So that's part of the culture, is like their first summer, they've already, all their peers are doing things. So they think, well, I guess I better be doing something too. So it's not a place where you're just in the classroom. You're also gaining that valuable experience.
Wonderful. So helpful, Tina. I think that the message here is, the time of pigeonholing yourself into one skill is honestly long past. So the idea that at a liberal arts college you're going to be less employable I think it's actually kind of the opposite. In many ways, you're more employable because you are more broader thinking. I just got another question in from somebody on YouTube saying that they've looked at Claremont colleges for a creative writing major. It seems to be included, but somehow it's not clear. Is there a creative writing major at any of the colleges?
Probably the perfect person to be answering this question.
Yeah, that's actually kind of like the journalism thing. One of my good friends at Pomona is a creative writing professor, a poet who came this year, and she's fantastic. So the short answer is no, there is not a creative writing major, although you can self-design one. But there are fantastic creative writing faculty at just about all of the colleges. So you can piece together a fantastic curriculum. That's what I did. I wasn't a creative writing major. I was an English major, but I did a creative writing kind of emphasis. And that's, I would say, what you would do at Pomona. Jonathan Lethem is a professor who's a very famous writer. He wrote Motherless Brooklyn, which was turned into a film this year. And there is some very famous faculty on Claremont McKenna's campus. So it's a rich place for writing. There's readings all the time. Authors come to speak. So you can do that. You just won't have that major designation on your transcript. But I think students need to be convinced that that is not as important as they think.
I always advise also for students who want to go into creative writing, whether it's novel writing or poetry or screenwriting, that they, one avenue is to kind of study your mentor, your secret mentors, or who are your favorite authors, or who are the and where did they go to college. You'll notice that they didn't necessarily go to a creative writing program, that they actually went to some of the most unique colleges out there. So
right. Yeah, it's all about gaining experience and finding your voice. Obviously you want feedback on your writing, so you want to find those mentors wherever you go. But knowing something about things other than writing is also important for writers, right?
So. Definitely.
You mentioned internships a little while ago when we were talking about jobs. I was wondering if there are any kind of typical internships that a Pomona College student would do, or if there's just a wide variety.
Certainly a wide variety. And it just popped into my head because we were talking about writing, and I know a student who, I think he was media studies, probably econ now, but he had an internship with the Dodgers organization, working in their media department. So that's a really cool advantage of being in Los Angeles. Students can actually get experience with major sports teams and major media kind of companies. And we do have a lot of athletes who go on to work for professional organizations. We have a professor in the econ department who does sports analytics. So that's kind of a popular subfield for our athletes. So we have quite a few who work for professional orgs. Other cool internships. I'm thinking of all the artsy ones. We have people who've interned with professional photographers, but a lot of our students go the pre-med route, and so they're doing more research during the summer or clinical experience. or volunteer experience. And again, being in LA, it's a great location for accessing all those kinds of things. Public policy is one of those unique majors that requires an internship as the capstone experience rather than a written thesis. I think they do a thesis too. I went to their presentations and it was so fascinating because they did all different kinds of projects, from veterans organizations to environmental concerns in Hawaii to education. So again, they could really tailor it to what their interests were.
Wonderful. I just got another question from one of our students, actually. How does living on campus all 4 years affect students post-graduation? She's wondering about, does it make them more independent? Does it make them more collaborative? Do you notice anything about that?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, 94% of our students live on campus all 4 years. We have a lot of singles, but students go from freshman housing where they're living in groups that are mentored by sophomores. So right away, you're in kind of a group situation. Later on, many of them live in suites with their best friends. So they each have a bedroom, but they have a common area. So they kind of learn independence. They have cooking facilities, but they also learn how to get along with people, whether it's sharing a room, in a suite, on your floor. We have a lot of layers of student mentorship. So your first year, you have these mentors who are called your sponsors. And the sponsor group, you call your other students in your group your spiblings. They have all these names start with sp. You can be spadopted into another group. But I think it does lead to some skills in living with other people. And I think Pomona students value the opportunity to be on campus because there's stuff going on every night. They can go to mentor sessions at night and they don't have to get back to their apartment. They can go to their friends' games or performances. So it's a really 24/7 kind of living, learning environment. When they graduate, another asset is that you're part of the Claremont College network. So let's say you move to New York or DC or Seattle, you're not just part of the Pomona network, you're part of the Claremont College alumni network. We share employment fairs. You can go to recruiting events on any campus. You can get a job through networking other Claremont College grads. So that's when that bigger network really becomes a great advantage.
Wow. That's really interesting. What a wonderful community. I want to be spadopted.
Okay, wonderful. So I want to give everybody just a couple more minutes. We're a little over time, so thank you so much for sticking with us. But if anybody else wants to pop a question into the comments box, it's not quite too late. But I also want to start to wrap up, and I want to just really say that, as a group that's trying very hard to reach as many families and as many students as we possibly can to provide more information and better access to college, I want to thank you so much, Tina, for joining us, for sharing your kind of clear vision, your clear thinking, and your care for this important work, and for letting us kind of get a peek behind the curtain and see through your eyes for the evening. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to let anybody who's watching know that, if you feel like you might need more information, even if you just want to talk, the first step with us, no matter what the outcome, is always just a phone call. It's a free phone call. It's one of those things we'd be very happy to talk to you about your specific circumstances, what to think about. Just knowing a little bit about what you don't know can be hugely helpful, because you can't know what you don't know until somebody tells you or helps you see that. So you can please feel free to do that. I'm going to pop the link one more time to contact us into the comments box, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And then Jenny, I want to hand it over to you to say goodnight.
Well, I just want to thank you all for joining us. This has been a very enriching and lively conversation with dear friend Tina Brooks, Associate Dean of Admission at Pomona College. And just hang in there. You're going to get through this, and keep learning. Keep your minds open and keep learning. Thanks so much, guys.